This episode is brought to you by Struzy Golf. Hey coaches out there, what I'm about to share with you is for the 1% who are ready to finally take their business to the next level. If you're ready to grow and evolve as a business owner, keep listening. I'm a coach just like you. I want more time to invest in my players, build my skills, and spend it with my family. We also both struggle with the idea of taking time off and sacrificing revenue. Coaches like us need tools to save time, automate admin tasks, and deliver excellent player experiences every single time. What if I told you there is a platform that captures 37% net new revenue in the first 60 days? It only takes 5 minutes to set up, and a simple copy-paste puts the rest on autopilot. As a founder and CEO of your business, you would fire yourself for not taking advantage of this value. Download a Struzy right now and start the journey to modernizing your business. Oh, and when you create your account, don't forget to add an asterisk, that little star thing on your keyboard, to your last name so they know the guru sent you. If you aren't convinced just yet, keep listening to learn more. Now let's get back to the show.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1, no touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf Guru Show. I am your host, Jason Sutton, and I am the guru, also the director of instruction at the beautiful Colleton River Club in Bluffton, South Carolina, where it is my mission to break down high performers in the teaching and coaching business in all fields of study, unpack and tease out what makes them great and successful, from daily habits to how they operate with their students. Make sure you download this episode and all former episodes of the Golf Guru Show and hit that purple subscribe button so you don't miss out on future shows that will be coming your way. All I ask is that you share this podcast on social or with your friends and with other coaches and players that might benefit from the information. I also have a couple of asks of you. If you don't mind, I am updating my website and have changed the domain name to golfgurushow.com. So if you can go and subscribe to it, that'd be great. You'll get an email and you'll get all future posts about the show. I have the podcast video versions on there as well. And also I'm posting them on my YouTube channel, which I'm kind of cranking back up. So go check them out there as well if you want to see the live version. And also, if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that would be super helpful as well. My guest on this episode needs no introduction. It is my good friend, Mr. Micheal Breed. Micheal is the host of Course Record with Micheal Breed on CBS, leading into the PGA Tour coverage. He's also a regular contributor to CBS Sports HQ. Micheal also hosts the New Breed of Golf radio show on Sirius XM Radio, PGA Tour, weekday mornings from 8 to 10. So go check that out. Best of New Breed of Golf on weekend mornings from 9 to 10. Micheal has led the way in digital golf instruction for many years and previously hosted the highest rated golf instruction series for the Golf Channel called The Golf Fix, which most of you I'm sure have seen. He's also a member of the PGA of America and contributes to the digital broadcast of the PGA Championship and the Ryder Cup. He further serves as the Chief Digital Instructor for Golf Digest, which focuses on innovating golf instruction and overseeing the Best Young Teachers program. He's such a great coach and even a better human being that has just an incredible energy and a servant mindset that is always trying to help others. Talking to Micheal always leaves me with such a great perspective and in a great mood. I just wanted to run through a wall after this conversation. So inspiring and gives us all a sense of hope for the future of golf and life. He simply just makes me want to be a better person. So without further delay, let's get to my conversation with my good friend, Micheal Breed. Enjoy. All right, Micheal Breed, thank you so much for taking the time. Welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on. How you doing?
I couldn't be any better, and I appreciate being asked. We're going to have a great time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've threatened to do this over the years a few times and just never made the connection, so I'm excited to chop it up with you. For like the two people around the globe that don't know your story, we don't have to go all the way back, but I think I met you probably 20 years ago or maybe even longer, because it tells us how long we've been in this business. But I always fascinated by the story of when you started with the Golf Channel, right? And it was a little bit more before that, but lead us off with, it's an important point of like really drive and like pursuing your passion, but tell the story of how you got the first opportunity to be on the Golf Channel.
You know, it's a lot of different things, Jason, right? We all dream, and the dreams come about for various reasons. And I'm watching golf instruction on TV one day. I'm a head pro at a 9-hole club, and I'm watching instruction on TV, and I literally say, man, there's just got to be a better way. Like, what can we do to spread this game and grow the game? It's something that it's a passion for you. Obviously, it's a passion for me. And so I was fortunate in that I've always had a pretty good work ethic. Might not have been the smartest guy around, but I've worked really hard, and I've been able to kind of work my way through some things. And so I just got lucky, and I reached out to Cablevision, who is the cable carrier up in our area. And I said, hey, I'd love to be able to do an instructional thing on Cablevision on Friday nights. And they went, great, we'd love to do it. Just bring me a sponsor. How many times have you heard that, right?
Yeah, all the time.
So I was able to do that, and I did that instruction. And then I met a guy. And the Monarch notes to this story are this guy that I met, played golf at Wake Forest, really good player when he was younger, hadn't broken 80 in 5 years. He came to me for some lessons, and 3 lessons later, he shoots 68. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm a great teacher. It just means I was luck again, right? Guy played pretty good. And he reaches out to a buddy of his who he went to Wake Forest with, who happened to be involved with Golf Channel, and said, I got a guy here I think could do a pretty good job for you. This is when they had that Golf Academy Live.
Oh, I love that show. Yeah,
right?
I always wanted to be on that show.
Yeah. So it was a 2-day show. And because I had worked at Augusta National, they thought, well, this would be great. You could do it during Masters. So I went, okay. So at the time, I was still going back. This is 1999. Masters when this happens. But at the time, I was still working the Masters. So I would do my job as a head pro, and then I would take a couple of weeks, right, like a week leading up to Masters, and then the week of Masters, and I would go and I would work, and I would help out with the merchandise program. So this guy says, well, why don't you come down and do a Golf Academy Live? And I'm like, okay, great. And then he says to me, calls me, I don't even know, maybe 3 weeks beforehand, and he says, look, what we think we're going to do is we think we're going to do a Golf Talk Live on Wednesday of Masters Week to get people sort of prepared for Masters. Instead of doing the Golf Academy Live, would you come on and do 2 segments on that show? I'm like, great, love to. So I do. The instruction thing on Tuesday goes great. And on Wednesday, I'm sitting in one of the most uncomfortable chairs you've ever seen in your life. That was one of these chairs where the arms were up around your shoulders and they slanted on an angle. And it's kind of, just the person who bought these chairs should never have had that job, because that was as bad a buy as anybody has ever done. So I'm really uncomfortable, which is actually kind of a good thing for me, right? Because like you just can't get a comfortable spot. And you're like, man, these chairs, and you're getting preoccupied with how bad the chairs are that you actually can have a conversation. And it was the year they added the first cut. So you had the fairway, and then you had this next level of rough. So they add it, and Mark Lai starts to say that he thinks that it's going to make the golf course play a whole lot easier. And I say, I don't necessarily. And I've played Augusta National a lot. I was there for 4 years, right? I can't even tell you how many rounds of golf I played. But at the time when I was down there, I was trying to play. Like my goal was still to play on the PGA Tour. So I was taking my summers and traveling around playing .com events. It was the Ben Hogan Tour at that time, but now Korn Ferry. And I was playing those events and then 4-spotting for other things, playing state opens, traveling up to New England, playing the New England Tour. I was doing all these things. And I was playing pretty good. But every chance I got, I was playing there. So if I had a Monday off, I would go and I would play 36 holes because it never closes down. There was always somebody to play with, and I would get out there and I'd play. I knew that golf course. And he said to me, or it wasn't to me, it was sort of directed at both of us, that this additional cut of rough was going to make the golf course play a lot easier. And I said to him, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be a lot harder because It's going to create some situations that these players aren't comfortable with, and they're going to play shots that they think are going to work that aren't going to work, and it's going to play more along the lines of the way Bobby Jones and Alister McKenzie designed the golf course. And I think what you're going to see is I think you're going to see a European win the tournament. That's what happens. Jose Maria Olazabal on Sunday hits his tee shot on 14, and it goes off the fairway into this second cut. And he plays a little running shot, and Tom Lehman plays a shot where he hits it up into the air. It lands on the green, goes flying over the green. He ends up losing. Olazabal wins, and all of a sudden, I'm a genius. I'm not kidding you. That's what happens. And now they have me back on Sunday night. And why did you think this? And I basically tell the same story again. And then after that is when they asked me to do some on-course commentary for him in 2000. Tony Tortorisi, who I love, says, Michael, have you ever done any on-course commentary? You and I know that when you're a golf pro and you are running a member guest, there is constant on-course commentary, right? I mean, sure. You're predicting this guy doesn't have a chance getting out of this bunker. They're going to fat this, right? And so my answer was, yeah, I've done a lot of on-course commentary. Not a lot has been on air, but I've done a lot of on-course commentary. So he tries me out, and it goes really well. And I end up getting sort of a seasonal job with him. And next thing you know, 7 years later, they asked me for some ideas for shows. So I present to them 3 different ideas, and they pick up the instructional one, and they give me a shot. And the show was incredibly popular.
Yeah, definitely.
It was. Now, part of it, too, was they hadn't really had a lot of instructional shows going on at the time. They were doing a show called The Turn. That was sort of instruction in part of the show, and then it was informational in part of the show. And anyway, the long and short of it is they introduced this show, and they projected it to be at what they call the rating was a 0.04. So they projected a 0.04 rating, and we ended up doing a 0.16, which is 4 times what they had projected. And it was off and running, and it lasted 9 full seasons before I kind of decided to do what I'm doing now.
That prior to Martin's show, or was it? I can't remember.
Actually, so what happened was after the success of my show, what they wanted to do was they wanted to have a show. My show was on Monday nights. They wanted to have a show on Tuesday night and on Wednesday night. And so I don't know if you remember this or not, but they actually set up a kind of live tryouts.
Yeah,
so everybody,
I did it.
Did you do that?
Yeah, I did it. Yeah.
So there
I
you
did
go.
a video and sent it into them
That's exactly
to be on
what
the
they
show.
did. And so what they were hoping was by doing that they could get 2 additional coaches. And what they wanted was they wanted another male coach and they wanted a female coach.
Right.
And some of it is like how the TV, whether it likes you or it doesn't, whether you like it or not. That's part of it. Part of it is how easy is it for you to get from wherever you are to Orlando?
Yeah,
right?
that had to be a challenge.
Then can it fit into the schedule? Well, I was the first one, right? So I'm a golf pro. Mondays are off for me, so I'm able to take Sunday night, fly down to Orlando, do the show Monday, fly back up Monday, and nobody is the worse for the wear. But everybody else, typically in our business, Monday's an off day. Tuesday isn't and Wednesday isn't. So what it does is it all of a sudden, it shrinks the field. And then the where you live shrinks the field. Martin was down in Florida, so he could drive up on Tuesday, do the show, and drive back down. And he was just coaching at the time, not a head golf pro or director of golf or anything like that. So he was able to make that work in his schedule and still does a phenomenal job. I mean, I love Martin.
Yeah, I do too.
But they weren't able to find another person where it could work with proximity and all that. And so they ended up just having the 2 shows.
So what ended it for you? That's a long run. I mean, honestly, that's unbelievable,
so
right? I mean,
they offered me, so my last year, which was my 9th year, they offered the contracts, they basically are 3-year contracts with an option in the 4th year. And so they picked up the option. After my first year, they went to a 3 and 4. And so it ended up being that the 9th year was the option year. They picked up that option. And as we started to talk about the negotiations of what was going on, I've got 2 young boys. At the time, they were 4 and 5. And I didn't want to leave on Sunday and miss Sunday dinner, miss church, miss being around. And so I kind of said, look, you guys have studios up here in Stamford, Connecticut. I live in Connecticut. I could do the show up in Stamford. And they didn't want to do the show in Stanford, which the irony is unbelievable because that's now where they shoot all their stuff from.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So I said, well, look, I can't do this anymore this way. The only way I can do this is if we do this where you put this up in Stanford. And they said, well, we can't do that. And I went, okay, I understand, but you got to understand where I am. And so then, of course, I reached to my partners, and Titleist and FootJoy were two of my bigger partners. And I said, look, this is what I want to do. I'm going to put a studio in my home and shoot all my content out of my home. Will you guys come with me? And they said, sure.
That's great.
So when we first left, we did stuff with them. And then we started doing things with another company, Morgan Franklin. And then we gave Morgan Franklin the naming rights to the studio. And so we produced content for those guys. And then I created a relationship with CBS because I'd been in the business for so long and done some stuff with them in the past. They decided that they wanted to have an instructional show on their CBS platforms. And so now that's exactly what we're doing is we're doing shows for CBS Sports and then also CBS HQ and CBS SN. And then I do some stuff for other corporations and things like that. And it's turned out to be a great thing. And, you know, I'm sitting here in the studio. And when we're done with this, I'm going to go through the door and I'm going to be in the kitchen and I'm going to be with my boys and my beautiful wife. So it's worked out perfectly. But Golf Channel, you know, they provided me an unbelievable opportunity, and it lasted for not just the show, but also the stuff that I had done with them beforehand. It was nearly a 20-year run with them.
That's incredible. Yeah. It's so cool. I mean, I think every success story has sacrifice, right? It's like we try to have balance. It's in our business. If you're trying to be the best and trying to be a high performer, it's so difficult. So I can understand that decision, and kudos to you to actually create, because you don't want to miss those years with your kids, right? I mean, that's the tough part, probably. I don't know how you did it for so long.
It's the most important thing. But to that point, really, there were two very important parts of the air quotes success. One of them was my partners, Titleist and FootJoy to name two. And there were a bunch of other partners that were a part of it as well. But like if they go, no, we're not going to go with you, well, then you know what? It's not going to really fly. And the other thing that has been a huge thing for me, and you well know this, is the PGA Professional. And one of the things that was really clear to me was in my motivation to try to bring golf instruction to people that might not get golf instruction, right? They might not seek you out or me out, and they're trying to figure out how to play the game of golf by themselves. I've got to get buy-in from the PGA Professional, who very, very early on figured out that I was trying to get individuals that don't take lessons to understand how to play the game of golf. And sure, like anything else, there are jealous people in the world. But for the most part, the PGA Professional really got behind me. And of all the things that helped make this success, the PGA Professional was the individual telling their clients, their members, whatever, you got to watch Breed. Go watch Breed. Did you hear what Michael had to say? And all that other stuff. And I will never forget that, nor be able to kind of pay everybody back. I can tell you that, and you know this because you do this a lot, you speak at PGA sections.
Right.
I've had the chance to speak to 34 different sections in the PGA of America. And
that's awesome.
I wouldn't have that option if the PGA Professionals didn't get behind me and root for me and know that I'm rooting for them. And it's never been a contentious relationship. It's been a very sort of collegial relationship. And so without my partners and without the PGA Professional, I wouldn't have had the success that I've been able to enjoy.
Yeah, and it's guys like we just talked about before we started recording. Is like I'm on our teaching and coaching summit. It's like you have to have guys like us to reach out and say, hey, can you come speak?
Yep.
Right, and you spoke at our fall summit or our spring big week, and then you did it again this year in a different capacity. And I think that'd be an interesting couple of bullet points to touch on, because I wanted one to talk about presentation and the importance of learning to present, which I think would be valuable for the young coaches out there and just to be a successful coach. Because I always believe that every lesson is a presentation, right? It's like how we use our language, how we structure our golf lessons. Talk about the couple of things that you shared with my section in your last talk.
Well, you know, it's interesting. So, and not necessarily just with your section, but with all these various sections, right? I tend to, when I get into this conversation about presentation skills, I ask individuals, what do they think the most important part of presentation skills, like what's the most important part of this stuff? And many times people will say knowledge of your topic. Now that would really seem like a logical path to go down, but it's actually way down the list. The most important thing is understanding how to present.
Yes.
and the way you use silence and the way you like dress. What do you wear? You'll see I wear blue a lot. Blue is a color that is a good color for me, at least has been up until the time when my hair started to turn gray. And now I'm starting to find that I need different colors.
No sympathy for me, bro.
But presentation skills are really important. And to that end, in order to be a good presenter, you got to study it and you got to put yourself into uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable moments. And so I took a lot of Dale Carnegie classes. In fact, I would routinely, now this is going back ways, I haven't done much of this in the last couple of years, but I used to take 7 or 8 Dale Carnegie online classes every single winter.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And then there's another thing called Toastmasters.
I did that.
Yeah. And it's phenomenal. Right? And you start to understand how you're going to present, and then you understand movement, and then you understand distraction, and you understand what the listener is looking for, what the viewer's wanting to see. And so you go through all these different things, and you start to realize how I dress, what I'm saying, how I say it, like it's all part of the presentation, right? And so you have to understand what your assets are. If you're funny, you can be funny. But if you're not funny, don't try to be funny. Just like there are a lot of people where the humor kind of falls flat. And so there's a lot of different things that you have to learn in order to make a presentation that people go, that was a great experience. You don't have to be self-deprecating, but what you have to do is you have to be able to understand what you're doing on a stage or on a camera. And I think one of the things that I've learned through all this stuff is, one, every presentation that I go to, I get if it's an in-person presentation, I try to get the audience involved as soon as possible. So literally like in the first 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to ask a question. Somebody's going to raise a hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, give an example of that would be interesting.
So I'll ask a question like, what do you think it takes to be a great golf professional? If you were going to have one word, what would that word be? Raise your hand if you have a word. And then I have a list, and I kept track of this list. So 30 at the time when I started doing this, had spoken to a couple of sections. And by the time I'm done, I said 34 different sections I spoke to. I have this list of words that came from all these PGA professionals. And every single one of them, when they had a word, they raised their hand and they would say, I like passion. And I go, okay, no. You're going to stand up. You're going to tell me what your name is. You're going to tell me where you work, and you're going to tell me this word and why it's important, and give everybody the opportunity to understand about presenting. And it's powerful. And so you get people involved. There's ways to ask, like a lot of people say, does anybody have any questions? I always say, who's got the first question? And it's a different way of saying the same thing, right? And so there are ways and words and thoughts that need to be used when you're making an in-person presentation. When you're doing a presentation over a television or a camera or a radio, you always use the word you. A lot of people will say the average amateur. And what I learned is that this thing in the Carnegie classes, they have a radio, they call it the radio station, WIIFM. It's what information is important for me, right? And so me being the listener, right? And so when you start to think about, okay, what's important to the listener? Now I'm going to go, okay, make the camera an individual. And so I'm going to say, okay, what you want to know is how to get rid of your slice. And they go, and so the number of times that people have come up to me who watched the show or had watched the show or watched my stuff that I do on CBS, they say, I feel like you're talking to me. And they don't even understand the power of that word you. Yeah, and it's really, really interesting. And so there are a couple of keys to being able to make a good presentation. And a lot of it is words that you're using, but not necessarily what you're talking about. Now, you have to be able to do that as well, but that's kind of down the list.
Yeah, I always ask when I do those talks to the host or whoever is like, who is my audience? Like, who's going to be in the crowd? Is it all teachers? Is it head pros, director of golf, GMs? So it kind of gives you an idea of like how detailed or how you can structure your presentations. So go a little deeper into that, Micheal. How do you prepare for a talk? Like, do you make a list? Do you write things down? I mean, obviously you got like maybe a PowerPoint, but like, what's the process look like? And do you practice it?
That's a really, really interesting question. So do I practice it? I get to practice it every day when I'm doing my radio show, right? Like you. And I've been doing it for so long that I don't necessarily need to practice stuff, but I do need to remind myself. So I have probably 10 or 12 scripted presentations that cover a wide variety of topics. I do motivational speaking now. I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and it's been great. And what I would say is that I don't necessarily practice it like I practiced it before, because I was very nervous when I first started doing this.
Well, yeah, we all were, right? Yeah.
So I've always thought, how do you get to a point where you can hit a golf shot when you're nervous? And it's through preparation. And so there was a time where, I prepared, like I'm sure you can imagine, and probably have done yourself. I have over-prepared. Nowadays, what I do is I have such a database in my mind that if you threw a camera on me and asked me to talk about something, I have all these different presentations that I've already done that I can go through and I can share. The other thing is that I've spent a lot of time trying to understand quotes. So quotes have motivated me a lot, and the individuals that have said them and why they said them and what the audience is for that. And so those have been really powerful. And so you're able to put together a very interesting presentation very, very easily. But I still have, like, if I'm going to go speak down to the Carolinas PGA, I'm going to have a presentation that I have done. I'm going to update it. I know who I'm speaking to, but I know what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to take some of the PowerPoint slides out, put some in, redo stuff, say things differently, make it a little bit different so that when I'm up there, I'm able to get my point across, right? And ultimately, the question is, what's the point you're trying to make, right? And I think as long as you understand what the point you're trying to make in your presentation is, you're going to be fine. I think there are a lot of people that get on a stage and they just talk to talk instead of talking to try to help people, right? And again, that goes back to our roots, right? We got into teaching golf because we want to help people play better golf. And so you're standing on a stage trying to talk to people about how they can get better. Well, one of the things that you want to do is you got to figure out, okay, what is it that you think that they need to do? And the other thing that I have gotten more comfortable with, sort of as an aside in these presentations, is challenging people for better, right? And so I'll give you an example. I had the chance to speak to the Titleist sales staff or the sales reps, and it was a big deal. And it was probably one of the most important presentations for me in my career because Titleist means so much to me. I'm over 25 years, I've been a brand ambassador with Titleist. And I know so many of these individuals because I've gone to all these sections, so they're all friends. So this is a really important one for me. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to find out, like, how can I take what I think is the best company and challenge them to be better? Because that's what you're really dealing with. Like, we're not necessarily talking with R&D. We're talking with people that are out there knowing their product better and helping individuals understand it. So I did a little research on sales staffs, sales forces, and find out, like, how many people that are in sales read books on sales. And you know what? It's a fascinating thing. The number is 10%.
Wow.
You would think, like, how many people that are golf pros? So I went to your section and I asked people, how many of you have read books on golf instruction? And the whole room, their hands go up. And then I ask them, how many of you have read books on sales? And like 10 people raise their hands. Now, there's a couple hundred people in there, maybe 300 people that are in there. And then you get 10 or 12 people with their hands up. And I go, how many of you think you're in sales? The truth is, we're all in sales.
Everybody, yeah.
Right.
No matter what part of the business you're in.
Right. And at that point, I've nudged the Carolinas PGA professionals to do that. But at the same time, back to Titleist, I've been able to take these people and I know, like, when I ask them, raise your hand if you've read a book on sales, and there's going to be, and because now I'm comfortable enough in doing this, I'm like, look, I know a lot of you are raising your hand because the person next to you raised their hand, but you haven't read a book. and they laugh.
It's audiobooks now, man.
Right.
Like, you can listen to them.
But the truth of the matter is that, you know what? When this is done, I get 5 emails from people that are at Titleist that say, you know what? You're right. You've motivated me to read a book on sales and to become a better sales rep. And it's kind of a cool thing when you're able to help what I think are the best at what they do to maybe even be just a little bit better. And that's part of the fun of all of it. And so that's kind of what
it's such an honor for you, right? It's like, that's a little out of your realm as far as like what we do on a daily basis, with whether it's teaching, coaching, or doing your thing.
Yep. That
probably got you a little nervous. But you did, I mean, again, that's a process that I wanted to get into. And we're very, very similar. When I was first starting to speak a little bit, and I was awful, as I tell everybody, nobody's any good at golf or presentations the first time you do it. you figure out whether you want to get better or you don't, right? And so I worked for one of the greats, which is Dana Rader.
Yep.
RIP, right? So
yep.
She's the one that brought me out of my shell and sent me to Toastmasters and taught me how to practice. And I used to write everything down. But as you do more of it, like you said, you sort of develop this inventory of things to say. And now it's like, you can't shut me up, which is like, if you saw me 20 years ago, you'd be like, I cannot believe.
Well, you know, it's funny because the biggest fear that people have is speaking.
Yeah.
Like public speaking. And so, which you think of, like we speak every single day and all of a sudden, somehow, this is the thing that's been so sort of strange for me. How is it that you speak every single day and you are afraid of public speaking? Like I get it. I get people who don't fly airplanes all the time. They fly maybe once a year and they get in a plane and they're afraid. Like I understand that. That makes sense. But you speak all the time. Why would you be afraid of making a public speaking presentation? But it happens. And by the way, it happened to me too. Right? You just kind of push through it. So,
oh my gosh, that's great. There's a lot to unpack there. We can kind of move on. It's like, now that you've been through a lot and what you're doing now, you got the radio show still going on and trying to like balance personal with professional. Like, what does success look like to you in both of those areas?
So, it's an interesting thing, right? So think about what we have done for the large majority of our lives professionally is we've given golf lessons, right? We've taught people how to play. And people will ask the question, what do you consider to be success in giving a golf lesson? And my response is always the same. When somebody comes back for a second time, that's success to me. If somebody comes and takes a lesson and I never see him again, then I stink. If somebody comes to me for a lesson and then I get a second lesson, now I know that I'm pretty good at what I do. And they believe me, right? And so what does success look like to me? This is the easiest way to say it. Success to me is when I start saying no when I don't want to say no. In other words, when I first start out, I say yes to everything. Can you do this? Yes. Have you ever done on-course commentary? Yes. Would you like to do a show? Yes. Like yes is coming out all the time. And when I get to a point where I don't have any more time, I start saying no. And if people aren't asking for your time, you never say yes or no. But when people are continuing to ask for your time and you have to say no, that to me is success because everybody still wants you to be around. I'm 62 years of age. I've been doing this for a long, long time. And I still get like, can you do this? Can you go over here? Will you speak over here? And to me, my no's now are, well, I can't do that right now because my kids are playing baseball. And so as I've become more successful, and this is the other thing that I define as success, success to me is a real understanding of priorities. So where it's very easy to lose your priority, right? And so you start doing things that might not be the best thing for you to do, but you do it. Now, my priorities are, I have my family right there as, one of the most important things in my life. I got my faith, one of the most important things in my life, right? And then I've got my job, which is one of the most important things in my life. But my job is number 3, right? And so when I start looking at where I am in the other 2 spots, I've started to become better, more successful in those spots because my priorities now are what I like to call in line. And so when I've got those in line, now I feel like I'm successful. It's not how much money I have in the bank or how much money I don't or where I went on vacation or what does my car look like or how many people I employ. That's not success to me. That's just part of the game. Success to me is, people still want me to be a part of their stuff. And I still want to be a part of my family stuff. And I still want to be a part of my faith. And that's success. So
I love it. Yeah. I always think of you, and I've heard you say many times, is like when we're overwhelmed or, like you said, getting too many requests, is like, we asked for this, right? And I find myself complaining like, oh my gosh, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this, like you got to check yourself and say, this is really what we wanted.
Yep.
Like, don't complain because this is what you asked for. But it's nice to be able to be in that position to say no. Like, when did that happen for you, do you think? Was there a moment? Was there a time?
It's an interesting one. There was a moment, and it was, in effect, the moment was when I kind of was coming to the end of my run with the Golf Fix. And the Golf Fix, the motivation of leaving the Golf Fix was my priorities were in line. because I wanted to be home with my kids. I wanted to be home with my family. I wanted to raise my kids. I wanted to be an active father. That's what I wanted to try to do. And one of the things that, we all have these sort of moments in our lives that kind of shape our lives, right? And I can remember it clear as day. I was 38 years of age. I was laying in my bed and I had this thought in my mind, I'm never going to be a dad. And then I thought, you know what? I'm a father to a lot of juniors who I teach, and I'm involved in their lives. So it's okay. Like, I'm okay with this. If I'm never a dad, I'm never a dad. And then I met my wife and we had kids, and I'm an old dad. I've got 11 and 12-year-old kids, and I'm 62, and I don't behave 62. And like I said, you said to me, you don't look 62.
Yeah,
because I hang around with 11 and 12-year-old kids.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna get into that, the aging thing.
So for me, like, what happened was I have this appreciation of I get to be a dad. I don't got to be a dad, right? I take an O and make it an E, and that's how I live my life. You've heard me before. We've talked about this many times before too. And so I kind of feel like when I started to go, I want to do this, then I was able to prioritize these things. I got tired of not being able to go to church on Sunday. I really did. I got tired of it. And I got tired of not having family dinner with my family on Sunday. And I was giving all this stuff up, and I wanted to change it. And so that's what I did.
Yeah. And I mean, your wife has got to be unbelievable to because I know mine is, to put up with all the stuff that we do and how we're busy and traveling and this and that. And I don't travel near as much as you did over the years, but talk about parenting a little bit. What do your kids think about you as being sort of famous, right? And definitely in our industry and in golf. And what have you instilled in them or hope to instill in them in the future?
So I love this line of conversation. So I had a really, these are all powerful moments that happen in lives, right? And so I had a teacher send me an email a year ago about my son who was playing a game in school. It was basically the contest had come down to my son and this other guy, and the other guy won the contest. And my son congratulated him, gave him a hug, and told him he was really proud of him. And the teacher took the time to write a note to me and basically say, you know what, you guys are doing the right things because your son has his priorities right. Most of these fourth grade kids don't do that. You're doing a good job. So one of the things that we try to instill in our children, and one of the things that my father instilled in me, was this: there's always somebody smarter and always somebody dumber. There's always somebody faster. There's always somebody slower, somebody richer, somebody poorer. Somebody has more than you, somebody has less than you. And so if you understand that you're sort of in the middle of where everything is, you can, Vince Lombardi, you can strive for perfection in hopes of greatness. You can always try to get and be the very best that you can be, but know that as you do that, there's still a whole lot of people that are ahead of you, and there's a whole lot of people that are underneath you, and just stay grounded. So that's one of the things that I think we're quite successful at teaching our children. The fun part is, obviously, I have a recognizable brand. And one of the things that I've always kind of had in my mind is that I get to do what I do. I've never really tried to be somebody that was, I'm the man. I've always had this idea that, man, how fortunate am I? I have dyslexia, right? And there was a period of time where I didn't know what I was going to do in my life because I didn't get grades that anybody would be proud of. I got an SAT score in English of 380. I mean, you get 200 for writing your name. I couldn't even double that with everything because it was so hard for me. And it grounded me. And my father grounded me. My mother grounded me. My siblings grounded me. My friends ground me. My wife grounds me. So I've always tried to be what I am, which is I'm a golf pro. I just happen to get to do these other things, but I'm a golf pro. And I love helping people, and people help me. And one of the ways they help me is they remind me I'm a golf pro. And that's not that it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just I'm not the smartest guy on the planet. I don't have the right to pound my chest. I'm not the fastest guy on the planet. I don't have a right to pound my chest. I get to do what I do. And so I think that's one of the things that's been a benefit for me. But I will tell you, one of the coolest things that has happened over this past year is I have made a lot of friends with people who are very well known, right? And so we go to a Washington Capitals hockey game, and my friend TJ Oshie is playing for the Caps. And I call TJ and I tell him we're going to be at a game. And he says, well, why don't you bring the kids down to the locker room? And we go down to the locker room, and he gives them some signed sticks. And all their friends are going, how did you get all this? And all these things are going, and they go, my dad. And then their friends look up their dad and they go, wow, your dad does this. And they start to go, Dad, we never really knew that you did. And that's exactly how like I want it to be.
Yeah, that's
right?
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I kind of feel like that has been a success. The other thing that's been really a power of strength for me is my wife. As you well know, with your wife, my wife is the daughter of a Rhode Island police officer. She is as tough as nails, and she doesn't put up with anything. You're going to make your bed. You're going to brush your teeth. You're going to lift the blinds. You're going to be early for your practice. You're going to say thank you to your teacher. Their grades just came out last week. And my youngest son, who's now in 5th grade, he has a science teacher who, when the science teacher wrote up his sort of grades and progress, she said, Michael greets me every morning with, how are you? And leaves class every day with thank you. And she goes, I really appreciate that about him. And that to me, like that's my wife doing what we would hope to have happen.
Right. That's great.
So, I think we're kind of lucky. My wife and I are a good team, and she's a remarkable, like people say, you outkick your coverage. I outkicked my coverage.
I'm right there with you, buddy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So let's transition into a little bit of teaching stuff, right? So let's help the young coaches, but also just talk about some teaching stuff. But there's a couple of questions that I'm curious about that I've asked the last few top performer instructors is, what do you know or have learned now that you wish you would have learned 10 years ago? And there's a follow-up to that too.
So what do I wish I learned 10 years ago? So I'll give you the terrible answer, and then I'll give you the answer that you're looking for. The terrible answer is this. I really believe that everything is an evolution. And I don't think that I would be where I am now if I knew what I knew now 10 years ago. And so I kind of don't ever wish that I knew something 10 years ago. But the question I know that you're getting to is this answer. And it wasn't really 10 years ago as much as this was probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago. 30 years ago, when I gave a golf lesson, I felt like I had to prove my knowledge to my students. And many times what I did was I saturated them with information, not necessarily because I knew that they needed to do it, but also because it helped me believe that I was smart. And what I have learned through this time is I don't really want to be the smartest person in the room. I don't want to prove to my students that I'm smart. What I want to prove to my students is that I'm trustworthy. And what I want to prove to my students is that, if you ask me a question that I don't know about or I haven't thought about, okay, I might not know the answer, but I'm going to find it. Because what I know about me is nobody's going to outwork me. You're not going to outwork me. You might work as hard as I work, but you're not going to work harder than I work. And I would say that the biggest growth in my instruction has been that I don't feel the need to just regurgitate all the information that I've learned from all these great coaches. What I want to do is I want to make sure that they understand that I know the path that I'm going to lead them on. And here's 1st grade. I want you to do this. And when you get this, then we'll graduate to 2nd grade. And then when you get 2nd grade done, then we'll go to 3rd grade. But we're not going to go K through graduate school in one lesson. And that's probably the thing that has been the biggest growth thing for me in instruction.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, and the reverse would be, 10 years from now, and this is always a tough one, is what will you regret if you don't learn it now or do it now?
So that's a really interesting question. And again, another terrible way to answer it, but just so you know how my brain works, right? So many years ago, 1994, I was extremely good friends with a guy named Vitas Gerulaitis who played tennis in the McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, Guillermo Vilas timeframe. And I taught Vitas, and I kept saying to Vitas as we were going through what we were going through, you got to come with me to Augusta and play Augusta National. And he said, I'll do it when I'm good enough. And the year that he died in September of a very sort of peculiar, it was a gas leak. And he went to a pool house, watched some golf, and he fell asleep and died at the age of 40. He never got a chance to play Augusta National. But the year that he passed, like that fall time, Augusta opens in October. So this is September. We probably talked about it in August. He said, I'm ready to go he was down to like a 5 handicap. He said, I'm ready to go to Augusta. And I went, okay, great. We'll go this winter. And then he passed away.
Oh, man.
And
that
so
sucks.
to your question, I literally am the guy who goes, if I want to learn about something, I'm going to do it right now because tomorrow is promised to no one. And so I'm not going down the path of I'll wait to do this when. I'm going to do it now, right? So ground forces and all that stuff, like I know about it. I understand how to teach it, but I want to get better at it. So I'm working on understanding that stuff. And I'm working on understanding how to become better in my presentations and better in my broadcast skills. So I'm going to go to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. That's on my list of things to do because I want to get better at it. Is it going to help me? Minimally. Is it going to have a financial benefit for me? Probably not. But I don't want to be average. I want to be a guy that's always trying to be the very best that I can be. And I don't want to wait for 10 years before I start doing something.
Is there anything in your life right now that you're a beginner at?
Is there anything I'm a beginner at? I would say no. I haven't really started anything new necessarily, but I constantly think that I have this idea as a parent that I could be a better parent. So I kind of feel like I can be a better parent. So I'm almost trying to have that beginner mentality. And as a husband, what am I doing as a husband? Am I taking my wife away on enough vacations? In fact, you know what? I would say this. There is one thing that I'm a beginner at, and it's vacationing.
Sitting still?
Well, you know what? Vacating.
Doing nothing?
Literally vacating.
Yeah.
I have been a bad vacator. And my wife has told me you're a bad vacator.
Yeah.
And so
unplugging.
Well, yeah. And honestly, though, just going away on vacation.
Yeah.
Right?
What's on your list? Where are you going to go?
So we went to Wimbledon last year. We also went to a couple of other really cool destinations. This year, we're going to go to Italy for the first time.
Cool. Yeah.
And I'm starting to understand, okay, here's how you have to plan this stuff, right? Because in our house, I refer to my wife as the head of planning and zoning. I'm the head of finance. And so most of those things fall in planning and zoning. Well, now finance has to take over a couple of things. So I would say, yeah, I feel I'm a beginner in vacationing and taking vacations. But
that's fair.
But I try to have this with the priorities. And then, of course, the third one is, in my faith.
We're always a beginner in that realm, I think, right? I mean, every day is a challenge.
So I was watching something the other day, and this individual shared a really cool thought, which was about worship. And they said, we think when we hear worship and we hear being a good worshiper, we think about going to church on Sunday. That's going to worship. That's being a good worshiper. And he goes, that's not it. He goes, when you really understand how to worship, what you understand is how to say no to temptation. And there are a lot of temptations out there. And when you can say no to those temptations, now you're a good worshiper.
I like that.
And it was really powerful for me. So those three things, those priorities in my life, I kind of feel like, you know what? I'm kind of beginning with those things.
I love it.
So
I love it. No, thanks for sharing that. That's super cool. This episode of the Golf Guru Show is brought to you by our new partners, Astruzi. Listen up, coaches. What I'm about to share is different than what you've come to expect from the guru. Normally, I'm the one asking the perfect questions to tease out the secrets, tips, and lessons learned from the best and brightest in our industry has to offer. This time around, I want to share some perspective. You're a business owner, right? You're a solopreneur. You're the founder, CEO, admin, sales, and marketing department. Like you, I often daydream about a world where these no longer consume our valuable time and energy. All of this takes us away from high-value time in the lab developing our players. If some days you feel like Bill Murray from Groundhog Day and your business is slowly sending you into an early grave, well, thankfully, I can say from personal experience, relief is only 5 minutes away. And I know you have 5 minutes. Coaches, if you have a Gmail account, an iPhone or an iPad, have your own LLC, constantly switch between 4 to 5 different services to run your business, charge at least $70 per lesson, or deliver at least 15 hours of lessons per week, then pay close attention because I'm talking directly to you. Astruzi is a business management platform where you finally offload all those wasted hours in admin tasks and get back to doing what we love, coaching your players, nerding out on ball flight laws, and about a million other things you would prefer more. If your business would benefit from 37% net new revenue, Astruzi is for you. If you struggle to build accountability with your players and dream of staggering 71.4% swing analysis viewer rate, Astruzi is for you. If you want a platform that protects and amplifies the decades of experience, instead of allowing players to window shop 5 different coaches only to choose the cheapest one or the cheapest option, Astruzi is for you. If you have no idea where to begin, Astruzi is for you. I personally have an account and can vouch for the value that Astruzi delivers. The download link is in the show notes, or head to astruzi.com to download the app. When you create your account, don't forget to add an asterisk to your last name so they know that the guru sent you. Go to astruzi.com today. As far as coaching goes, right, or teaching, obviously separating those two.
Yeah.
And you're on sort of both sides, or your media and also doing what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
How do you think we're doing as an industry, coaching and the teaching?
So I think we're better. And I think we're better in that, because as we do as an industry, right, the question becomes, for me, like there's a lot of things to the industry, right? So, back when I first started, there were 45 people that really could give a great lesson. Nowadays, there's probably 45,000 people that can give a really good golf lesson. And so I think in that vein, I think we're doing great. I think that relative to getting our information out via platforms like what you've got or platforms like what I have, I think we're doing a whole lot better. And the game of golf is really well received right now. And I think the PGA professional has had a lot to do with that. And so what I would say is, COVID helped grow our business. But if people stunk, they probably wouldn't play. And there's nobody that I know who isn't trying to figure out how to be better at the game, either by going to go see you for a golf lesson or me for a golf lesson, or by going online and doing a sort of DIY.
Right. Yeah. A lot of information.
I think we're doing 9 out of 10 in that. I really do.
Okay.
I believe that the information that's being shared by Clay Ballard, George Gankis, these guys are putting great information, and there's a ton of them. There are a ton of really good coaches that are sharing wisdom in the social platforms. And I think it's great.
Yeah, I think, and that's what the reason I started this podcast, a few years ago, is to, like you, we want to leave the industry a better place, right? Than when we got it. When we were younger, like you said, there wasn't that many. One, the information wasn't available as easy, right, with the internet and then obviously social media. But 2, there probably weren't as many coaches out there that were willing to share their information, right? I think that's changed a lot over the years.
Tons, yep.
Right? So I think as far as the young coaches go, like what advice, and you got the young man that works for you and does the show, that does the radio. Yeah, Greg Deschamps. What advice are you giving young coaches out there to sort of follow that path of getting better as a teacher?
Well, one, you got to take it personally. And that doesn't mean that if somebody says something about your teaching skills that online, that you all get upset and do all that. I don't mean that. But what I mean is that each and every time you go to do your job, give a golf lesson, it's got to mean something. It's got to be a personal thing for you. It can't just be, I've got to go give a golf lesson. It's, I get to go give a golf lesson, right? So that's that thing again. And I think that's one of the things that I try to instill in young coaches and, frankly, in young people, right? Find your passion and be the very best you can be at it. What I also think is important is never thinking that you know it all. In other words, like understanding how to give a golf lesson is one thing. Understanding how to present your information is another thing. Understanding how to get your student to trust you is another thing. There's so many little different nuances that are required for success in a golf lesson experience that it's vital for you to know that you're never a 10, that you're always trying to be the very best you can be. It's that Vince Lombardi quote, strive for perfection in hopes of greatness. That's really what the whole thing is about. You try to be perfect in everything that you do. You won't be, but you hope that it leads to greatness. There's another great quote by Jerry Rice. I will do today what others won't, so I can do tomorrow what others can't. And I think that if you look at a certain something, look at the number of people that aren't willing to do that, aren't willing to read that extra book or stay up 45 minutes later and read a book, get up 25 minutes early and do some push-ups, go on a podcast with you and talk about golf, put themselves in uncomfortable situations like going to Toastmasters, which can be incredibly uncomfortable. And I think that the more times that people can realize that they are on the bottom rung, hoping to climb a ladder, that they have no idea how many rungs are on the ladder. You just keep climbing and climbing and climbing. Now, all of a sudden, you have a chance to really achieve what your dreams are. And then the other thing is, and one of the presentations that I do, motivational presentations that I do, is called Motion with Direction. And I think there are a lot of people that want to become a teacher, but they have no idea of why they want to become a teacher, right? Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And then what are you doing it for, right? So for me, when I said, I want to be a teacher, okay, well, what do you want to teach? Like, what do you want to major in? I wanted to major in putting. So I felt like at the time, if I majored in putting, I could separate myself from others. And so I studied it and I spent a lot of money on it and I invested in it and I got pretty good at it. And that's how I started teaching tour players. They would come to me for putting lessons. And then ultimately it would transition into full swings. But it started right away with the putting. And the final thing that I share with people, and it's probably not the final, but I would say, the third thing is if you expect people to invest in you, you have to invest in you. And that's a really important thing, right? So there are a lot of people that'll say, I can't afford a launch monitor. Okay, well, figure out how to do that. Go up to somebody who's a friend of yours and say, would you be willing to lend me $25,000 for me to buy a launch monitor and I'll pay you back. We'll arrange a plan and I'll pay you back your $25,000 and the interest, I'll give you a lesson a month. And there's nobody that isn't going to make that deal if they have the wherewithal to lend you the $25,000, right? I firmly believe this, that what we ask people to do is trust us. What we ask people to do is invest in us. And their investment is time and money. And if they're willing to spend time and money on us, we should be willing to spend time and money on us. It's a really simple model for me. And so those are the kinds of things that I try to share with young professionals.
Yeah, I'm a big Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins fan from back in the day. And Mr. Rohn always said, for things to change around you, you have to change.
Yep. Right.
Work full time on your passion, and then next thing you know, you're not going to have to work. Right. It's like
exactly right.
Something of those lines. But yeah, that is really good. So as far as like the hot topics in the teaching industry, the big one, I don't know, did you go to Open Forum at the show? I remember seeing you.
No, I didn't. We had the Folds of Honor dinner was that same night.
Gotcha.
And I tend to host that Folds of Honor dinner for Colonel Dan Rooney. So, I mean, again, I would love to go to Open Forum. And I was talking to Chris Como and he's like, after the thing, come on over, be my guest. And I look, CC, I would love to do that, but unfortunately I can't.
Yeah, so the big, and you being all over social media is the big thing has been the short game, angle attack debate, and kudos for you for getting Joe Mayo on your show because I'm a friend with Joe and he won't do any podcasts, and I was like, oh, so you'll go on Michael's show and you won't come on a podcast. I mean, it was great to see him at Open Forum up there sharing his information.
I love Joseph, and Joseph and I. This is I know you didn't intend on going down this, but I want to tell you this story because this is really cool. So, and I mean this when I tell you this, I love Joe Mayo. I love the guy. And he and I have become good friends. We have shared some very private conversations. But our very first conversation was this. He sent out a tweet. This is probably 8 or 9 years ago. He sent out a tweet. And he said, Butch Harmon, I was so proud of this tweet. Butch Harmon, Hank Haney, and Micheal Breed know nothing about ball flight laws. Now I'm sitting there.
I remember that.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah. I've got stories around that one.
I was so proud to be in that group. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I immediately followed him, and he followed me. And I direct messaged him. And I said, Joseph, I would love to talk to you on the phone if you have time, whenever you're free. And he said, you don't want to hear what I have to say. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, why? And I said, because you have the ability to teach me something, and I can become better after our conversation. I'm not upset at you at all. I think you're really smart. I've read all your tweets and posts. I think you're exceptionally smart. I've talked to people. I think you're exceptionally smart, and you can make me smarter. And I would love if you could make time to talk to me. Here's my number. 10 minutes later, the phone rings.
Yeah.
And we start talking. And we probably talked for 3 hours. And it turns out that I actually do know what I'm talking about when it comes to ball flight laws. And we had a conversation about that. And he said, and there's another great line that was delivered by another friend of mine that I won't share his name because I know you know this guy, and I'm sure these people but this one individual, we're sitting down, we're shooting an infomercial together, and we're talking for a little while. And it was the same exact thing that Joe Mayo said to me, basically. And he said, you're a lot smarter than I thought you were, is the line. And I said, thank you. And why thank you? And I said, because my goal in what I do is to make it so people can understand it, and not so that I can be the smartest guy in the room, because I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. And what happened with Joseph was Joseph all of a sudden started to understand that I do know what I'm talking about. And what I said to Joseph, which really got him to think a little bit, was this. We were talking about Butch, and I said to him, let's assume that Butch doesn't know anything about ball flight laws. And let's assume Butch doesn't know anything. And he goes, and to Joe, now Joe has changed, by the way.
I know. This is he's evolved.
And Joe has changed. In many respects, our conversations have helped him look at things through a little bit of a different lens. And so I kind of feel proud that Joseph is in this. I said, let's assume that Butch doesn't know anything at all. He doesn't. I know, but let's assume that he doesn't. Okay, but he doesn't. I go, I know. But let's just assume it for a second. He gets everybody to play better. And if he gets everybody to play better without the best information, what's more important? Is it trust and believability in what you're teaching somebody? Or is it actual facts? And he goes quiet for a second because Joseph is really cerebral and he is extremely bright, as you know. And he's like, I never really thought about it that way. And I go, yeah. And so if you can get people playing better golf, despite the fact that you don't know what you're talking about, then you must be one hell of a coach.
Especially major champions.
And by the way, it's plural.
Yeah, right.
And I would argue like the best players in the world. I mean, Norman and Woods, he's worked with those guys, not for nothing. But anyway, I love Joe Mayo. I did not hear about what took place at Open Forum. But what I would say is that angles of attack and lofts and spin loft and all these other things that it no doubt went down that path. I think so much of it really has to do with your ability to control the face of the golf club and the delivery of the face, that the swing that you make, both backswing and through swing, have to match the shot that you're trying to hit. And I know a lot of people who deliver very shallow angles of attack, and I know people who deliver very steep angles of attack, and there are people that are sort of in between. And so one of the things that I love about short game, the same thing about full swings, is a lot of it is your personality. And I will tell you, one of my cooler things that I had the chance to do is work with great players, touring professionals, winners on all tours and all that other stuff. One of the players that I worked with was a guy named Bronson Burgoon. And Bronson, when I first started working to him, we did a lot of stuff over the phone or over video and things like that. And then finally, after a period of time, I was down at the Players Championship and I was working with him at the Players Championship. This is probably, 4 or 5 years ago. And I asked him to hit a little flop shot. And he hit this beautiful little flop shot. And I said to him, "What'd you do?" And he said, "I don't know." And what you also have to figure into all these different things is there's a lot of players that just know how to do something and don't necessarily know the mechanics of what they did. They just do it. And so I think one of the arts to all of this is being able to allow somebody as a good player to not have to go into a part of their brain that doesn't allow them to image the shots that they're hitting. And I think that's one of the things that happened with Seve Ballesteros when he started working with Mac O'Grady. And he just became one of the most spatial minds in the history of the game of golf, won a Masters at 23 years of age, right? And all of a sudden now he's thinking about P2 and P3 and transitions and all these things and femurs and dorsiflexes and things like that. And he gets lost and can't really compete. And I think that while it's important to know about all the things that we have advantages with now, launch monitors, simulators, things like that, but it's also, you can't coach out of somebody the genius that exists in somebody.
Yeah, there couldn't have been probably a worse match as far as player to coach. But Butch has been on the podcast twice, and he's told some great stories about working with Seve.
Yep.
And he was trying to get him back out of, be that creative artist that he was so good at, right? It's like the difference between teaching and coaching, and Butch, I think, is still, the greatest coach.
I totally agree.
That ever lived. Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it always comes down to the answer we give a lot of times when people ask us questions about anything in golf instruction. It depends, right?
Yeah.
It depends on the player, depends on the person in front of you. But yeah, Joe, I think Joe, if he's done anything for this whole discussion, is he made us take a deeper dive into what's actually happening and how to create, shots in that window that we know is successful, thanks to guys like John Sinclair and guys out there that are measuring, what the best players in the world are doing. So we know that window, but there's a lot of different ways to kind of get it done. And my guy, James Ridyard, kind of he was Switzerland. he was in the middle of, Parker McLaughlin and Joe, and it was great, but it was an awesome discussion. I mean, that's the thing. We want to have healthy debate in what we're trying to do, and hopefully it makes us better teachers and
and I think
administrators
look at
of the information.
Look at what Parker has done with his, stuff. I think his stuff
amazing.
Is fantastic as well. I think Ridyard is great. I mean, this is the thing. There's so many different ways to help people improve, and fortunately for us, it's like art. If you took Monet and Degas and Picasso and you put them in front of the exact same scene and asked them to paint it, you would get 3 very different, and they'd all be really incredible, but they'd all be very, very different. And I think part of the art, in my opinion, of being a great coach, back to your questions about, what are things that you share with these younger coaches, is know what everybody teaches. I don't want to be, I make the analogy to restaurants. I don't want to be a Chinese restaurant. I don't want to be a Japanese steakhouse. I don't want to be a Italian restaurant. I don't want to be an American. I want to be all of it. I want to serve seafood. I want to serve great steaks. I want to serve great pasta, because you never know what somebody wants to eat. And if you can serve them what they want to eat and they enjoy the meal and they get better, you win. And so to me, learn it all. Know what Ridyard has to say. Know what Butch says. Know what Joe says. Know what you say. Know what everybody says. And that way you're going to become the restaurant that can feed anybody.
Right. Yeah. Then it becomes like I said, the genius is the stuff in the cracks, right? How do we deal with that personality? How do we, what you do so well, the bedside manner.
Yep.
Something that stuck in my head that when I heard you first speak years ago was people drive to our lesson tee and they pass so many coaches and so many teachers. And it's an honor that they would come to see us, right? Like you said, coming back to see you twice is even a bigger honor. It means they actually trust you or giving us a chance. So it's like after every lesson, I always say, I'm grateful for the opportunity to help you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, appreciation, I think sometimes is lost in some
it's
some
an
of
interesting
the
thing. So that story that you shared, this gentleman called me named Bob Fouty. And Bob is in Akron, Ohio. I'm teaching at the time at Sunningdale, which is in Scarsdale, New York. And he's bringing his son out for a lesson. They got in a car. So this is what they did. He worked all day. It's now 7:00 at night. He piles in the car. Unbeknownst to me, he brings his son Tyler as well. So Blake is getting in the car, going to take a lesson. And Tyler is his youngest son. And they're driving out. And they drive out. They get to the New York area at about 1 to 1:30 in the morning. They check in. They go to bed at 3. They wake up and I try to get to where I'm going to be like 30 minutes before it's going to start. So I have an 8:00 lesson with them. I try to get there at 7:30. So I get there at 7:30 and they're there. And prior to that, I'm getting ready for the day. And I'm thinking about, because what I do is at the end of the day, I look at what my next day looks like, who's coming. Oh yeah, the Fouties are coming. I'm going to get 3 hours with them. And I'm up that morning and I'm thinking about my day. And then I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe these people drove out. And then I just started thinking about it. And I thought, man, they could have gone to anybody. I'm looking at a map and I'm drawing a circle, a 7-hour circle, like all the way around. It's a 14-hour diameter, right? If they go west versus going east. And who's in that? I'm like, there's a lot of people in that. There's a lot of golf pros in that. And so I thought, man, the first thing I said to them was thank you. It was the very first thing. Like I saw them, we had hey, I'm Michael, Blake, Bob, Tyler. What time did you get in? Blah, 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 blah. Well, listen, I just want you guys to know, thank you very much for coming. And those individuals changed me. Like I was always grateful to be able to give a golf lesson, but I never said to people, thank you. They always said to me, thank you. And I would always say, you're welcome. Right? And now I'm always, hey, thank you for letting me help you out like you do.
Thank you for your support.
Different, it's a different way to look at it.
It's a different mindset. Yeah. And I mean, even at our own clubs, like we don't own it. Dana taught me that. It's like, they don't have to come to me. Like they can go somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's more convenient, but it doesn't mean, so like you can't take it for granted ever. It's like, it's just something you got to always kind of keep that mindset.
It's a get to, not a got to.
There you go. Love that.
All
right. So a couple more and then I'll let you go. Appreciate your time.
Anytime.
I'm always curious about daily routines, right? It's like, how do you look like you're 45? how do you not ever age? So there's got to be, a daily routine and like fitness, anything you can share as far as like, what's a good day look for Micheal Breed?
My day looks like this. I wake up at about 5 to 5:15. I get up, I come down here into the studio, turn all the lights on, set everything up. I have a Big Moss putting mat that's right next to my hitting area, and I make 7 putts in a row from 10 feet. And I don't leave until I do. And then after that happens, that's typically at about 5:30 to 5:40. I go into this area where I have a stationary bike, and I get on the stationary bike for 20 minutes and I watch whatever. If there's a hockey game the Rangers have played, I'm going to watch a hockey game because I want to talk to my boys about the hockey game. If there's no hockey game, then what I'll do is I'll watch some videos. So I like to watch, Fleetwood. So I go to YouTube and I just start searching on YouTube, and I'm riding my bike and I'm singing and I'm doing whatever, right? And then at 6 o'clock, I go upstairs and I turn the coffee machine on for my wife. I don't drink coffee. Turn the coffee machine on for her.
That would be dangerous.
Yeah. Oh boy, you have no idea.
You on caffeine.
Oh, well, no, I'm not afraid of caffeine. It's just coffee is not good.
Okay.
My caffeine, I get into my caffeine, but it's a little bit later.
All right. Okay.
So I turn the coffee machine on and then I have a breakfast. And my breakfast is Raisin Bran mixed with another cereal. And that cereal could be Cheerios. It could be Rice Chex. It varies. And then I read the New York Post and I find out what's going on in the world, what's going on in sports, what's going on in the market. So I kind of familiarize myself with what's happening from a, current events thing. And then I go upstairs, I shower up, I do push-ups in the morning up there. So I do a pile of those. And then in the shower, I do 60 heel raises. So one of the things that I was told a while ago was your calves are the heart of your lower body. And so your heart is pumping blood to various parts of your body. But what you need to do is you need to pump that blood back up to the heart. And so when you get your calves working out, now all of a sudden it's moving up. But the other thing that it does is it makes your toes strong, which in the limited research I've done on this, toe strength is a really important part of clubhead speed. People talk about using the ground and jumping off the ground, but not a lot of people are talking about the strength of your toes and how your toes really create a push. Like your knees bend and your hips do this and this does this and rotate this, but it's got to come from somewhere, and it isn't coming from your heel.
First time I've heard of that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and again, I don't want to tell you I've done a lot of research on this, but I've done enough to understand that they're very, very important.
I'm pretty sure you don't do anything without a little bit of background and research. I know you well enough.
I spend a little time trying to figure it out.
Yeah, you do.
The other thing that's really important too is as I'm doing all this when I'm in the shower, I'm constantly trying to widen my toes. So what can happen as you get older, particularly where you wear socks and they push it in and the shoes, like the toe box, can tend to push your toes together. So we don't spend enough trying to widen our toes. So I spend a lot of time working on widening toes and doing those heel raises. And then all that stuff ends at about 5 of 7 to 5 after 7.
Okay.
And then from there, I come downstairs and I start my day. Greg is sitting in here. He gets in here punctually at 7 o'clock every morning, and we start preparing. And one of the things that I would tell you that it's the get to, not got to, right? So as I come into the studio, I remind myself of, and again, people call it success. I call it fortune. My fortune to be able to do what I do. And I get to talk about golf, right? At 17 years of age, I was lost. I'm not kidding you. I was lost. And my uncle said something to me that stuck with me and changed my life. And what he said was, it doesn't matter to me what you do with your life. Find your passion and be the very best at it that you can possibly be. And he said, if you want to be a janitor, have the cleanest hallways and the best bathrooms, and you're going to be fine. You'll always make enough money to live, and you'll never feel like you're working. And it turned my life. It really did, because I was, again, not that you should know this, but by the time I graduated college, I stayed back 1 year. I went to 5 different summer schools, and 2 of those summer schools were in college. And I couldn't get an A until I discovered psychology. I couldn't get an A. And when I discovered psychology, I found a passion. And then when I discovered golf, I found a passion. And then when those two got mixed together, I found what I wanted to do with my life. And so I'm always reminding myself of, man, this is what I get to do. Like,
Powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of different things that I go through in my, like I remind myself of all the time, but there's not a day that goes by that I don't sit there smiling, going, man, I cannot believe what I get to do today.
Gratitude.
So, right.
Yeah. How much do you get to teach and coach nowadays? Like, what is it? I know you probably missed some of that because you got so much.
Well, certainly not as much
going.
as I used to do, right?
Yeah.
I used to teach, I probably taught 8 hours a day, 6 days a week for, boy, this is hard to even go back this far, but I'm going to say 20 plus years. And that's at a minimum. I don't want to say I laughed at, but I never really kept track of the number of hours that I gave in a given week or in a given year or anything like that. And there are a lot of people that are aware of, I gave 1,000 lessons last year. I mean, I have no idea how many lessons that I've given, but what I can tell you is that right now, I probably teach 12 or 15 people. And the people that I teach are great players. Some are, some aren't. What I have the privilege of doing now is, and you probably enjoy this privilege as well, I never teach the person that's killing time. I teach people that are passionate about wanting to get better.
There you go. That's basically retirement as a teaching professional.
That's exactly right.
Teaching who you want to teach, when you want to teach.
I teach people who love the game. They're thirsty for information. They want to get better. And I mix those individuals in. I make time for those individuals because it's not how I pay my bills now. You know, it's not a job. It's a hobby, and I love it. And I like staying in it, and I like talking to people like you about the game and what's happening here and what's this person doing. I love talking to coaches like Chris Como and Joe Mayo, people that are hands-on with elite teachers, and like I love all that stuff. It's powerful. So I still have my hand in the instruction space. It's not quite as steep as it once was.
Sorry, you've earned that right. I mean, that's the thing. That's what you have to tell yourself is you've been in the trenches, and now you're being able to enjoy it, and then kind of like you said, play both sides, doing some media stuff, and you got the biggest audience and platform now with your radio show and then the golf show.
Radio show's been unbelievable. I mean, that radio
I listen
show,
to you all the time in the morning. I texted you the other day, like something hits me, I gotta reach out.
I know, it's great. I love it. No, look, you know what? And by the way, like what's fun is that the text message that you sent to me, I'm getting that all the time.
I
don't know if you remember
it.
Sterling Sharp.
Oh yeah.
So Sterling Sharp has become a friend. I did this thing, and the word of the day was inspire. And what I shared in the word of the day was, we have a responsibility. Just because you're not a leader doesn't mean you can't lead. And so inspire people through a work ethic, inspire people through opening a door, inspire people by buying a cup of coffee. And he sent me a text message right away. And he goes, man, I love you. I just want you to know you inspire me to be better. And
likewise,
those your texts, like they're coming in all the time. And I eat it up. I just eat it up.
I was just honored you actually texted me back. I was like, oh wow, right during the show. Like, let's go.
I can multitask. Awesome. I was like, as I know you can too.
Oh, you got to, right? We're on 24/7. When do you prep for the show? Like the night before? Like, I don't know how you. I always thought, doing the show and like you did like the fix and like Martin Hall does this thing. And I asked him that when he was on the podcast, like, do you ever run out of ideas? Right? I know you do some world, the golf world stuff, but there's got to be some days you're like, man, what are we going to do tomorrow?
Well, it's interesting because there's always something to talk about, right? And if you take a topic like face control and putting, and you talk about the importance of face control and speed control and centers of hit and all that stuff, and you really elaborate on it, you could talk about that topic for 6 hours, right? And so you never really run out of topics to discuss because you can never fully bake out a topic. We could talk putting every single day for 365 days for an hour of the show and never have all of it completed.
For sure.
Right? But to answer your question, when do we prepare for the show? So we do the show from 8 to 10, and then we take a little break, and at about 10:30, we start preparing for the next show. Now,
there you go. Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
What ends up happening is we will prepare probably 6 or 7 topics of conversation that we're going to talk about in a show. But invariably what happens is we don't get to all those, right? So, for instance, there was one time last week where we talked about playing one club golf and the importance of playing one club golf. We had prepared to talk about one club golf a week ago, and we kept putting it into the next show, but we never got to it, and into the next show, and we never got to it. So in many respects, the shows kind of almost through time prepare themselves, right? So for instance, tomorrow's show, Peter Malnati had a really cool thing about, that he talked about in his press conference today about what do we want to see in golf? So when you watch professional golf, what do you want to see? And what he was referring to is that he thinks that a lot of people are sick and tired of talking about live and money and all that stuff, right?
And he's on the players board now too. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And the rumor is that he might be giving that up at the end of this year. But anyway, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that he had some really good sound about that, right? So now if I send that out to the listeners and I say, what do you want to see in golf? It opens up a line of conversation.
Yeah, you get 100 phone calls.
So we'll chuck that out tomorrow. And then Sahith Thagala was talking about this golf course that they're playing down in Houston is a park. It's a municipal golf course, right? And so if you took a scratch handicap player and put him out on this golf course on Monday, and you prepared it like it was a Saturday or a Sunday, like in its cutting of the greens and firmness and all that other stuff, what would a scratch handicap golfer shoot? And that opens up a line of conversation that is 2 hours in and of itself.
Sure. That
right?
makes sense. Yeah.
So we have that. Well, he said that 2 days ago, and we touched on it a little bit yesterday, but we didn't really get into it. So that's on our list of things to do. Wyndham Clark hurt himself lifting some weights. So we'll talk a little bit about that and weight training and how you prepare for a tournament and all that stuff, right? And then there's Nick Sherburne's coming on the show. So like we have all these different things that are all put together. We've got it all scripted out. And we obviously have what our word of the day is going to be, which I can't tell you.
No, that's fine.
But I know you understand. But my point is
this won't come out till next week. So
right. So yeah,
good.
exactly. So, our show, it doesn't take as long to prepare for because we're constantly just chucking ideas down not on a whiteboard, but might as well be on a whiteboard, just on a piece of paper. And then we kind of put things together. And then, oh, by the way, tomorrow, Scotty Scheffler's press conference was today. And Wyndham Clark's press conference was today. So we're going to hear those press conferences, right? And there will obviously be the question, will Scotty Scheffler win this week? Will he win 4 in a row? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on. But it takes us probably an hour to an hour and a half to prepare for the show. And then the next morning from 7 to 8, we'll go over what we planned on talking about. Plus, if any news has come out overnight, we'll add that to the stuff. And then the final part is there's our producer with SiriusXM by the name of Billy Dowling. And Billy will have stuff that he does. I don't want us all to prepare together until the rundown comes out in the morning on, say, Thursday morning or Friday morning. Billy will have his ideas of what he wants to try to do. So then we'll take, okay, I like that idea, I don't like that idea, and we'll put that on that piece of paper. And so by the time it's said and done, the thing is full. I just save a little bit of room on the side. In there, we have all these little different things that we've put together. Who's going to be doing what and when and all that. I have every single show
That's
What's
impressive. On paper, that's impressive.
I have
It's not even on an iPad or a phone.
No.
Or a computer.
So this is another thing that I've studied,
Old school.
believe it or not. It's actually when the brain writes something down,
Yes.
it records it deeper instead of pushing a button. But the other thing is this, the ink color that you use, I always write in blue. The ink color that you use has a complete effect on how your brain remembers it in a positive or negative light. If you write something in red, you immediately think you did something wrong and it's a graded test that you got back when you were in school.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
And so I never write in any pen other than blue. I don't borrow anybody's pens. I have a pile of them. They're G7s. These are all my pens.
It's gold.
That's
It's gold,
what I do.
Jerry.
The 07 G2. That's what I get those pens and I write in those. That's all I use. So I write everything down. And then I have these thick binders and I put 2 years worth of the shows in the binders. And then what I'll do is, like when it comes to Masters Week, I'll go back through my Masters Weeks of years past. What are some of the words that I used? I may stay away from those words or I may use one or two of those words. So I have a constant, it's like a library. I got a catalog of all of it.
Behind the scenes, baby. Behind the curtain.
Yeah, I haven't really ever shared that with anybody.
I feel honored. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. This has been incredible, my man. This is you inspire me always, but I mean, just to spend time with you, I feel super grateful. I got one more question. Everybody has to answer this question. If you heard the podcast, you may know what's coming, but if you had to get a message to the world, to billions of people, and put it on a billboard, what would your billboard say and why?
There's a couple of things that hit me.
Could be quote. Like, I know you're a big quote guy like that. I think quotes are cool.
No, this would be one billboard would just be thank you. I think that I don't think we say thanks enough. And I don't think I have individuals that are responsible. Tony Tortorisi gave me an opportunity at Golf Channel in 2000. I call that guy every single year to let him know that he changed my life. And I let him know and I say, thank you. Tom Stathakis offered me the job at Golf Channel. I call him and say, thank you. So one of my billboards would be, thank you. One of my billboards would be this: your weakness is your strength. If you don't know that, you haven't learned it yet. But once you understand the things that you think are preventing you from getting you to where you want to get to, they ultimately become superpowers. Because once you learn, when I was young, again, with this dyslexia thing, I really hated it. It made me feel stupid. My grades supported that notion. I didn't get great grades. And then what I learned was that it was a superpower for me. That I learned if I could get past it, figure out how to work around it, that there was nothing in my life that I couldn't conquer. And I did learn how to get past it. I do know how to reel myself in when my dyslexia is taking over, which it still does. And it's become a superpower. And it has been the thing that has sort of inspired me to what is this sort of quote that I have in my head, which is, and it's kind of twofold. Right now is the hardest whatever you're doing will be if you do it the next day. Because it will get easier day after day after day after day, right? And so I kind of feel like if this is the hardest it will be, then tomorrow will be easier. So all I got to do is just get through this day, try to just muscle through it, and then do it again tomorrow because it'll be easier tomorrow. And when it's easier tomorrow, then it'll be easier the next day. And so that's what this superpower has taught me. And so there's not a single one of us on the planet. There's only been one perfect one. Everybody else is flawed, right?
That's right.
And so we all have our things. And who knows what it is? It differs for everybody. But when you get to where you can conquer that thing, that one thing, when you conquer it, now all of a sudden it's a superpower.
So well said, man. What a fantastic way to close. I appreciate you so much. Thank you,
Bro,
my friend.
I appreciate you too. And I know how hard you work. I know your passion for instruction. We have shared employees. I mean, you know, you and I have known each other a long time.
Yes.
And I know that you have the same thing that I have, which is you love to help people in the game of golf and really in anything. And anytime that you ask me to do something, it might take me a little while to say yes, but I'm going to say yes. You will never get a no from me, ever.
You're the best, my man.
Yeah.
Anything you want to plug as far as like your socials? I know you're not crazy on the channels, but you got people that do that for you. Your show, but just share your shows or anywhere you find you.
I do Course Record on CBS, which airs leading into PGA Tour events when CBS has got PGA Tour events. So make sure you look for that. Also, too, the radio show on Sirius XM, which I love, A New Breed of Golf. It is every Monday through Friday from 8 to 10, and then Saturday and Sunday from 9 to 10. So we're 7 days a week there. And then, of course, I'm doing stuff with CBS on CBS HQ and CBS SN. And then I'm doing a bunch of stuff with Titleist and FootJoy and Morgan Franklin and other partners on my social media channels. So Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, just search at Micheal Breed, and I can be found trying to help everybody play the best golf they can and smiling along the way. That's what I'm trying to do. So
there you go. I appreciate you, my man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for everything. I appreciate it. Congratulations on all your success too. Okay.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you go. First, big thank you to Micheal for coming on the show and taking the time and sharing his incredible insight on golf instruction and life that I know will help all of you become better coaches and better human beings. Make sure you follow Micheal on all socials at Micheal Breed Golf and check out his website at michealbreed.com and listen to his morning show on XM Radio Channel 92 from 8 to 10 in the morning on weekdays. Thank you again to our great sponsor, Estruzi and Jason Bellotti. Go to the app and download it and check it out. Make sure that you add the asterisk after the name so we all know where it came from. You can also follow me on Twitter or X at Golf Guru TV and Instagram as well, which I do more of my posting on Instagram. If you have a comment or a question, just shoot me a DM or you can email the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com. Thank you so much for the well-produced episode and all episodes by my man, Joel North. Thank you for your continued excellent work. Music was brought to you by Kevin MacLeod and Zach Mullett. And like I said earlier, leave me an iTunes review. That would be cool. As I leave you with the Jim Rohn quote that I try to live by every day: study, practice, teach, and then make sure you pass it on. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you next time.